So you've drawn a pirate ship and traced a pirate ship and colored it in so it looks like it's in silhouette. The next step, if you haven't already and you see any stray pencil lines, is to take an eraser and clean those up. I always like to hold my paper while I'm erasing so it doesn't wrinkle on accident. I'm almost stretching it even so that I can control where I'm erasing instead of accidentally crumpling it up. It's always good to pay attention to whatever step you're doing. Then, the next thing we'll need to do is add color to create our silhouette. In this almost finished example, I used a different art material than we'll be using today, but you can still see the overall colors that I chose. To make our sunset, I'm using the colors in the color wheel, except green, and I'm working in color wheel order, from yellow to orange to red to magenta to violet and even blue. That's often the order of the colors you'll see in the sunset, especially from yellow to magenta, and usually you'll see smooth transitions of color too, like I'm trying to create a smooth transition in my picture. Today, we're actually going to be using markers on our picture. And if you're not sure exactly the color, because there's some duplicates of each color, we can always use a blank piece of paper to test it out and see if they're the same or what color you want. Often today, you'll have to take turns and share with the other people at your table. So that means we'll have to use our words and communicate. These two yellows are almost exactly the same. So it doesn't really matter which one we start with. And we're going to start behind our boat, and I'm going to imagine an oval shape of that yellow color. It's probably easier to visualize here where I've already got the color. We're going to work in oval shapes of each color till we get to the edge. So when I use the marker, this is a chisel tip marker, and we want to use it on its flat edge to help fill in the back. So I'm going to draw my shape and start to fill it in with strokes of color. Since I used Sharpie to create the lines, it shouldn't smear if I do happen to go over the edge a little bit. That's a really nice thing about using Sharpie to trace with, is Sharpie won't smear when we go over it with something else. I mentioned these markers are chisel tip markers, which means they can write in thin or thick lines. Since we're going to be filling in the background, we want to be using thick lines, and you can change the kind of line you're making by changing either which way you're pulling the marker or how you're holding the marker in your hands. So if you're finding it's making a thinner line and you want a thicker line, either try rotating the marker or try pulling your hand a different way. When I am coloring with my marker, I want to use the flat edge so I can fill it in really quickly. Then I'm going to work my way around the color wheel using the colors in order. So next I would look for a yellow-orange color, or I could just go right to orange. With whatever color I'm using next, I'm going to make another oval of that color. Just kind of lightly drawing my oval in here. And I can even add the oval shape on the water too, because we're going to have the water be a reflection of the colors here. So I was kind of sketching it lightly till I sort of got the shape I wanted. Now that I have the shape I want, I'm going to smoothly stroke to fill it in. And since we did the Sharpie to trace, I can even draw right over top of my pirate ship or tall sailing ship. If you want more of a transition between colors, another option would be to sort of go and overlap a little bit. It's sort of up to you if you like the smooth look or if you like the overlap look. I think I like the smooth look a little better, but I've already overlapped here, so I can't really change it. Maybe I'll try to smooth this out. And I'm using those wide lines to do this layer. When I'm done with this orange, it might look something like this. To soften the edges, I just added a couple dashes of color. You don't have to do that. That's an option that I chose to add. Then I'll look for the next color in my rainbow order. If I wanted to do dark orange, I could do that, or I could move on to red. There's a lot of personal preference here in your picture about yours and how you want it to look. Remember, as you're going, if you're not sure exactly the shade of a color it makes, you can use your spare piece of paper to test out colors on so you can understand what they look like, because they might look different than the plastic that they're in. Also, when we're using the marker, we always want to make sure we're closing it every time and really pressing to make sure it's closed. I'm going to do a few more layers and then we'll chat again. As I'm getting to the edge of my picture here, I'm continuing to go even though it's going off the edge. I'm imagining the same width of the shape all the way around. And it's okay if some of my other layers sort of go off the edge and then come back on again. That's fine. It's a funny preference, but I sort of like to, as I'm trying to make my particular lines a curved line, rotate the picture as I'm going. I'm pulling the marker gently in one direction rather than scrubbing it back and forth, because that helps keep the nib or the tip of the marker lasting a lot longer, because it doesn't have to be broken down on every stroke. So it'll keep it sharper longer and help the ink stay flowing so more people can use the marker. As I'm going, I'm also trying to avoid white spots, so if I see a white spot, I like to fill it in. I just personally think that makes my artwork look a little more professional. For my next color, it's going to start right here, and then go off the edge, and then go back on over on this other side, and then all the way around. When you're done with all the colors, it might look something like this. It might look different. That's okay. That's some of the beauty of art. If I want my waves to stand out a little more, maybe I can draw a few more on with the black marker. I don't want to add too many because I still want to make sure my artwork is distinct. So maybe I'm just going to re-outline the shape with just a couple more really small lines. So this time I'm using the tip of the chisel tip, but I'm not pressing. I'm just sort of really lightly letting it drag along the paper. Maybe I could add just a few more waves. So I'm sort of letting my marker skim along the paper. I'm not really putting any pressure on it. The ink works well enough on its own. I kind of like the sort of random sketchy quality this is giving it. It looks very organic to me. I think it does look quite a lot like water. I'm especially doing a couple more waves under the reflection of my boat to really emphasize that there is a reflection of the boat there. I think this just gives our drawing a little more context. But I'm doing this part last because this is a water marker, and if I'd colored with the other colors over it, it would not be so nice to mix up those colors. But black can go over top of any of the other colors because it is the darkest in value. Black is actually technically a value and not a color, which is why we're saving it for last, because it can go over the other colors cannot go over it. And there we have it. Our picture looks beautiful, and I think that we are done.